Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Okay, so not my revenge, so I don't know if I'm allowed to post, but this is a really funny story constantly being retold to family members. Before I was born, my grandpa had just retired and decided, screw it, I am going to live in the middle of a mountain that is in the middle of nowhere. He bought a piece of land far away from any city or village and started building a house. His only neighbors were an old lady and a crazy idiot. After half a year, he decided to permanently move in there and started building more and more things to accommodate himself. One of the things he built were a wall around his property and an outdoor toilet. This will be important later. During this time, his crazy neighbor was trying to sell property. My grandpa offered to buy it from him, but the guy declined, asking for 10 times more than my grandfather offered. They got into a sort of an argument and ended all the communication. Now the crazy jerk was out to get my grandpa. He would call communal services and make police officers and inspectors come on a 2-hour ride for every possible thing he could. We're talking about stuff like leaving a dog without a leash in a walled-off backyard or having leftover building materials on a road, which my grandpa also built. Before that, they had freaking dirt roads. Now, my grandpa did not mind, but every time police were involved, they had to go over the backyard belonging to the old lady since work was going on and a crazy neighbor sealed off a gate connecting his and my grandpa's property was garbage. It did not look nice or smell nice, but my grandpa was busy with other stuff to keep removing it every night, only for the jerk to rebuild it the next morning. Even though my grandpa did not give a crap, a lady did, and she was on my grandpa's side. So one day when the officers came, she asked a couple of questions to these lovely people. She then contacts my grandpa. She learned 2 things. First of all, since the wall was built on my grandfather's land, he had all the rights to it. He could destroy it completely if he wanted. Second, filling a gate in a wall with crap was illegal, but my grandfather did not have the right to build a gate into someone else's yard without explicit permission either, and pursuing it in court would only end up with having to seal it off. She informs my grandpa about all of this, and soon they hatch a plan. They wait for 2 to 3 months for heavy autumn rains to start drowning the land. Then the old lady files a formal complaint about the smell of the garbage. My grandpa pleads guilty and signs off a document that legally forces him to destroy the gate and remove the garbage from it. Now, the very same day, my grandpa signs off on the documents. The biggest storm of the year starts. It rained for 7 days before the inspectors could come to remove the garbage and the gate. Now, my grandfather had previously cemented 3 of the 4 drains that were built in the wall. This, plus the mountain being steep, resulted in the wall acting like a dam for all the water that was coming in. Almost the entire yard was filled with water, eventually even lifting everything up from the outdoor toilet my grandfather built. His neighbor tried everything he could to stop the inspectors from destroying that garbage-filled gate. He pleaded and pleaded, but he could do nothing. He did not own the wall and he was the one making all the communal calls. And the inspectors grew to hate him. Furthermore, my grandfather had pleaded guilty, meaning that any form of complaint on the decision of the court from a third party was impossible and deemed invalid at this point. After the inspectors removed the gate, a small sea of crap, construction materials, and water poured into the yard of the jerk and ended up watching the water destroy his entire yard. All while my grandpa and the nice old lady were drinking tea from her balcony. The aftermath was even better. Needless to say, the guy needed to pay thousands to repair all the water damage and cleaning he had to do. All the while, my grandfather's and the old lady's house were completely untouched by any of it since they were on a lot higher ground. The best part is that since he admitted he was the one filling the gate with garbage to the inspectors, they made a note of that, and sometime later, he received a written order from the court that he had to repay my grandpa for any property damage because of that. He ended up going to court, losing after the old lady testified in grandfather's favor and having to rebuild the gate that was destroyed along with all the court fees. The guy moved out as soon as he could, and from what the new owner said, he sold it for less than half of what my grandfather offered him. This happened just this morning. My day started with me showing up to work only to realize that today was my day off. With my day off, I decided to go and buy a turkey for Thanksgiving next week. I didn't go back to change at my home because the store was closer. So I went to the store in a typical office outfit, not thinking anything of it. There were plenty of turkeys, and I chose a nice big fat one. I was salivating already. As I was about to put it into my car, this older woman says, "I'll take that one," and reaches for it. I thought that this was some joke she was making, like, "This is a nice turkey, I'll take it," to only pretend to grab it. So I chuckle until she actually has her hands on the turkey and starts to try to take it. I was shocked and asked what she was doing. She became all huffy and whiny and said, "I thought you were restocking the turkey, and since you were holding it, I felt it was better to grab it from you than have to bend over and grab one and potentially hurt my back." Restock it? Wait, I don't work here, and I was putting the turkey into my cart, not out of it. She got really upset and grabbed her husband's attention. This guy looks like one of those "my wife is a queen and should be treated as such" types. He looked at me like I'm some snot-nosed teenager who needs to be told how to respect people, even though I am pushing 30. "Son, now you give her that turkey and maybe I won't report you to your manager." I just looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, I don't actually work here. There are plenty of other turkeys. I mean, if she needs help putting a turkey in her cart, I won't mind helping, but you seem like you're capable of doing that." He then raised his voice at me. I'm sure people all through the store could hear him. "I tried to be fair with you. Give her that turkey on a count of 3 or I will have no choice but to put the fear of God into you. 1, 2. At this point, I'm pretty much just going, "What the hell?" all over in my head. Is this guy for real? I just want this turkey. There are plenty of other turkeys. Why is this one so special? Thankfully, the manager was close by and interrupted him. "Is everything alright over there?" The man looks at him and says, "Yes, your employee over here is refusing to give my wife that turkey. She has a bad back and trying to lift one of these turkeys could cause her harm. I should sue you and this son of a witch you hired for attempting to cause my wife bodily harm." The manager looked at me, saying that I clearly do not work here, and said to him, "Sir, this man doesn't work here. He has no obligation to give you that turkey, and please calm down, and I will grab another turkey for you. Otherwise, I will have to ask you to leave." The man's face turned red and just lost it. "How dare you talk to me in such disrespect? I will have you know that this is no man. This is a boy who needs to be taught a lesson in manner, and I should give you the same treatment too." His wife looked at me like a teacher would at a misbehaving student. "You see what you caused? Your mother must have been a horrible parent if this is a child that she raised." "Oh no, 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 no. My mother just died a few weeks ago, and this is just… no. You know what? Here, take it. Take this stupid turkey, go, have it. It's not worth putting up with this Jerry Springer act. So have your damn turkey." I slammed it into their cart and stormed out. I thought I would be done with them, but Mr. Anger Management decided that I didn't excuse myself from the table properly enough. "Excuse me, you disrespectful brat. I demand an apology for how you treated my wife and I want it right now." So I gave it to him. I flipped him off and told him he can shove this up along with that turkey. Then I let him know that my mother died only a few weeks ago and told him to thank his wife for what she said. I have never been punched in the face before. Well, I can mark that off my bucket list. So yeah, when the cops asked if I wanted to press charges against this guy, you bet I did. I didn't get my turkey though. It did. He was pretty pissed off, especially since he believed that the cops were there to arrest me because I had flipped him off. I was completely disrespectful to him. I guess he didn't get the memo that he had punched me in the face. I think the dumbest thing though, that I really don't get why he said to the cops in an attempt to try to cast a blame on me and accused me of being a gang member. Remember, I'm in office attire, not very gang looking. Maybe he thought flipping him off was some gang signs. I don't know, he was playing the victim the whole time and the thought of him being in trouble for this blew his mind. When they put him in cuffs and into the car, he started bawling out crying and saying stuff that now his poor wife will be without care or some crap. Speaking of his poor wife, she only came out when he was being arrested and just acted all crippled and weak even though she had run out of the grocery store pushing a cart full of food and supplies. While the cops were asking her questions, I could see that she was giving me the evil eye. Update. The store manager gave me a free turkey as well as several free pies. I got pumpkin, of course, white chocolate cheesecake, pecan, and cherry. Thanksgiving turned out great. I was working in a big chain of animal product store here in Quebec. We had a rotary manager for a week. It's a manager with no fixed store that goes in to replace sick leave and vacations of other managers. He was terrible and would overfill the rows. He flattens the big bags of cat food so that 5 would fit in height, when normally only 3 would, 4 if you push it hard. He insists that this was the proper way, but the bags were not keeping flat. They were taking their usual form after half an hour. As assistant manager, since a week, I would remove the extra bags. We got this new employee, a tiny girl around 16. She was nice and all, but she couldn't move the heavy stuff like a cat litter. She came to see me because a dum-dum did it right before her, left and I didn't see him do it. The bags wouldn't budge and a customer needed one and all our stock was on the shelves. Together we were able to remove it, but then I saw the upper shelves, all in industrial steel, move while we almost got it out. I had 2 possible actions. Let the small girl take the hit and break her hand, she didn't see it, or move my arm to protect her. I was about 3 times her size. I took the hit. The top shelves were full of 10 types of cat food, all weighing around 25 kilograms and about 10 bags of each. My arm hurt, but nothing too bad. I filed an accident report, meaning I had to take pictures and manage my arm. At the end of my shift, my arm was blue and in total pain, and I went to the hospital. The doctors couldn't believe nothing was broken. I got hit by a car 6 months later to get the same news. They ran a test and realized the only damage was on my nerve system and would need therapy. They got me the minimum leave of a week to give to my employer, and the next day I was in a clinic for work injury. They have checked everything. Program physiotherapy and a leave of minimum months. My arm was hurting so much I couldn't lift a glass of water or play a video game or lift a book. A month and a half later, the doctor told me I can get to work, but to manage what I was doing, to respect my body limitation and to not make any repetitive movements. I had a limited weight I could carry. Not much, but I could take most of the medium-sized bag. But here is the trick. According to the law, repetitive movement meant 8 hours in a day of the same movement. So I was given 5 hours of cash duties, 2 of cleaning at the end of the day, and helping customers here and there. 5 hours of cash was too much and I told them, but they said they could do it legally and to stop complaining. One time a customer asked me to lift a heavy bag and told him I couldn't since I had an injury. I was written up because I shouldn't have told him I was injured, even if I didn't say it was work-related. Then I was written up because I've expressed pain in front of customers. I explained I couldn't help it. My nerves were acting up, and since I couldn't, as stated by the medical bill, respect my limitations, since that legally didn't mean anything, there is nothing I could do. They asked me to go see the doctor again. So I went to the doctors, and here is the compliance. She thought it was a waste of her time, of taxpayers' money, and it was keeping other patients to see her, and she wanted them to pay for this reason. What's the lightest bag of food you have in the store? 8 kilograms. So you can't lift more than 7.95 kilograms. How long does it take to scan the items of a regular transaction? Well, about 30 seconds to a minute. You can't repeat a movement more than 30 seconds in. Also, I request an inspection of the store. I was laughing. With that in hand, I went back to HR and my managers. And they were pissed. They had useless employees who had to pay full-time. I left 2 days before the end of my rehabilitation treatment for a job in the field of study and I sued them. The inspection forced them to change all the rackings and the store had to close for a month while they had just renovated everything a month before I got there. A little background story first. It's pretty long, so I'll put a TLDR at the end. So, this happened a few years ago while I was working as an assistant produce manager for a local grocery chain. I was young and dumb and was still unfazed by lack of sleep. So my friend and I decided to hang out at a bar, less than 8 hours before my shift was scheduled to begin. Now, while we were at a bar, we each only had one drink in 2 hours and only spent the time at the establishment because he needed to have a drink to play pool. $6 each for unlimited games isn't bad. Around midnight, we left and decided to take the scenic backwoods road home. Unfortunately for us, we got more than a lovely scenery. We ended up losing control and rolling completely over because something ran out in front of us. Luckily, I didn't have any fractures or breaks, but my arm did get covered in glass and was bloodied up pretty good. Took us about an hour of superiority tests, which we both passed, waiting for the police wrecker to tow the vehicle and transportation to the local police station so that we can be picked up. Also another hour until we could find someone awake to take us home. By the time I was back in the comfort of my own house, it was 2 hours before I would have to leave. I was the only one scheduled with the ability to do the produce order. Literally no one else knew how to do it, and if it wasn't in by 9 AM, nothing was coming for the next day. And because of an inflated sense of loyalty I still held for my job at the time, I decided that I would show up. Still bummed full of adrenaline, I showered and went to work. As soon as I punched in, that's when I started to come down from my adrenaline high. I was sore and tired. At 8 AM, I called my boss and told him the order was done and I will be leaving. As soon as all the managerial duties were done and any worker could handle the department, I told the store manager I was going to urgent care. They took me pretty quickly, and I was home with several prescriptions by 10. The next day, I was still in rough shape, but I wouldn't be running the department. The produce manager would be on with me, and because of the way we worked, he would break down the shipment and load a bunch of carts that I would fill the tables with. I thought I'd be okay for the day. My boss was notorious for working whatever hours he felt like, but I never let it bother me too much until this day. When I arrived at work, my boss was gone, and half of the day's delivery was already put away. He decided in his infinite wisdom to just work overnight and have me handle the rest. For the first few hours, I struggled to get anything done. The physical portion of my job took more of a toll on my back than I expected, and at 9 AM, when the store manager showed up, I went to him and complained. I explained about the car accident that he already knew about and asked if I could have some help. Someone to lift the heavier boxes onto a cart and I'll be able to take it from there. His response? You need a doctor's note listing these restrictions. Cue malicious compliance. I called the urgent care location I went to the previous day and spoke to the same healthcare professional. After explaining what was happening, I requested the doctor's note limiting the amount of weight I will be expected to lift for a few days. Needless to say, she was shocked. You shouldn't be at work at all right now. I'll give you a doctor's note until your prescriptions end, but you need to take the next few days off. I told her I had 2 days off in a row coming up and she wrote me a doctor's note saying I couldn't work until afterwards. She emailed me the note and I gave it to the boss. Now I am off of work for the next 5 days. Edit. A lot of people are commenting that the store manager was doing me a favor or covering themselves. You could be right, but the tone and attitude I received didn't convey that at the time. My being injured outside of work didn't qualify me for workers' compensation as per company rules, and any injury I did sustain could be directed towards the accident as a cause. We're talking retail work here. There was once a cashier that had a lifting restrictions of 10 pounds, and when he got into arguments with a front-end manager, they transferred him to janitor, a job that required him to empty compost bins that could weigh up to 200 plus pounds. They told him they didn't expect him to do the work, but it was his responsibility to find someone to do it for him. Before this tale even begins, this is obviously a throwaway account. This is a big story spanning 2 semesters. Last semester, I enrolled in an introductory French course at my university. This was to learn at least a little bit of French so that I could read French papers about French filmmaking techniques, since I'm a pretty hardcore film student and I really love film as an art form. Plus, I needed some general education credit for my degree, so it made sense to take that course. I went to the first lecture kind of dreading the course. I was in 19 credit hours, which is taking 6 classes in a single semester, and the class was 4 credit hours, meaning we met 4 days out of the week, every week. Very overwhelming schedule indeed. Needless to say, I didn't work a single job that semester. The professor, who will be referred to as baguette, because it's one of the few French words I actually know, began to go through the syllabus, and I watched as the excitement that is usually present in students on the first day slowly left everyone's faces. Before I explain why, I have to address that this is the most basic French class that the university I go to offers, and it's really meant for people who never took a lick of French in high school, just like me. Baguette announced that not only would he be teaching the entire class in fluent French with no English whatsoever, he wouldn't be answering questions in English at all. And if you asked him a question in French but got even a word or conjugation wrong, he wouldn't answer you either. Attendance was mandatory as well, and you could only miss 4 class periods before he started dropping letter grades. Now, this attendance policy is unfair because we met for class just under 60 times that semester, meaning you would fail the course if you missed 8 class periods, which is only about 7% of the total course. I was looking around the class and people looked like they couldn't drop this class fast enough. Then he announced that not only would we not be using a physical book, we'd be using a free website online, a site called Prince Interactive. Sorry if I butchered that. Now this got some excitement back in the air. Textbook prices suck, and anything to lower the cost of education for students is great. You can even use the site yourself to practice your French skills, if you want. It's open source, knock yourself out. That said, the site isn't meant to replace a textbook. There is a free workbook and audio files to help with oral comprehension on it, and that helped me and some of the other students pass some of the exams. But the site's equivalent to the part of a textbook that actually teaches you the material is extremely lacking, sometimes only having a couple of paragraphs about a really important concept in the language. In short, it gives you a ton of ways to practice concepts, but almost no ways to learn them in the first place. This would have been totally fine if Baguette would have explained things better in his lectures, but as you'll recall, he gave them entirely in French, and in fast fluent French. So picture this, you have to sit through 4 classes a week that you understand literally nothing of for an hour at a time, while the professor rambles on in a language that you don't understand but are desperately trying to learn. And on top of all this, you can't even ask him any question in English because he won't answer you, and you can't ask him any question in French either because you don't know how to do that properly yet. And you won't for 3/4 of the semester, because a unit that cover question words and phrases was arbitrarily put a few weeks after midterms. And on top of all that, you can't even really do your homework or study for exams because you have no idea what any of this nasally crap means. Naturally, we as a class slowly started to get more and more frustrated as time went on. A few of us decided to band together and be friends and study partners to weather the storm. I will call the important ones to the story R and S. S was a foreign exchange student from Spain who spoke perfect Spanish and was taking the class to learn French for when she goes back to Europe. Now, we dug into what all other classes Baguette taught and found out that he taught Spanish too. Perfect. We found a loophole. We could ask S a question in English and she could ask him in Spanish, since it wasn't asking him in English. And he could answer in Spanish and she could translate that back to us in English. Now, you might be saying to yourself, that is stupid. And no self-respecting educator should teach in this broken, crabby, but backwards way. Well, you're right. This worked for a bit, but he started answering S Spanish questions in French to combat our little exploit with the rules. We were defeated and back to square one. We needed to devise a new plan because Most of us were failing at this point, and we were stressed beyond belief. R, a frat lad, and I, decidedly not a frat lad, became unlikely friends. He was a pretty naive kid, and he was a hardcore drinker. It visibly took a toll on him. He had a beer gut at 22, an addiction kind of mentality hollowed him out and made him flippant and emotional. The guy was super easy to piss off and he overreacted to everything. I felt bad for the guy, and even outside of the struggle in class, I tried my best to be there for him. We were talking one day and we decided to meet up at the library and just theorize ways to crack a class to get at least a 60. At the library, R was playing around on the website, trying to find the videos the professor would use for the oral part of the exam. Basically, you'd listen to the video and copy down whatever the person was saying for credit. The problem is, it was hard as crap, and it was easily the part of the exams that took the biggest chunk out of the class grade. He couldn't find them on the site anywhere, and he got frustrated and gave up. So he started filling in the slots where you put answers on the homework pages of the website with random words. That's when we realized that when you do this, the site gives you the right answer regardless, no matter how wrong you are. Essentially, we now had access to the entire course's answers for the homework section, and all we had to do was put one character into the answer boxes, and since all we had to do for the homework assignments was copy and paste our answers into a Word document and submit them online, we could theoretically do all the homework while knowing zero material whatsoever if we just changed the answers in Word. We sat for about 45 minutes and did the rest of the homework for the entire course, this way, in one sitting. We agreed to not turn it all in at once so we couldn't get caught, and we agreed to keep our mouth shut and only share this with people who wouldn't tread on us. Obviously, we told S. One of the things I'll never forget about that first French class was that during the final, one of the students started to quietly weep. Then the weeping got louder, then louder still. The student was clutching his head in his hands, and you could feel the palpable, impotent frustration at his inability to do French correctly. After I finished the final, I saw him outside the class staring out the window in the hall. I asked if he was alright and what he was crying about, and he told me he couldn't answer even the most basic questions, asking for words for things like left and right and up and down, and that was the thing that finally broke him. That got to me, man. Most of the kids failed the course, even some of the ones who used the homework exploit. R and S passed with a D and I passed with a C. Surprisingly, the professor actually liked me for some reason and graded my exams a bit more fairly. Even still, I'm an A/B student, one in the honors program at my university, so a C kind of stung my GPA. But seeing as more than half the class failed, I counted my lucky stars that I got off easy. I went to enroll in my classes for the next semester, and I had completely forgotten that I still had to take another French class for my degree. I checked the class list, and the second class you're supposed to take in the progression was only taught by Baguette. No other professor taught beginning French too, apparently. This struck me as kinda odd, so I checked the rest of the French classes that were available. All of them, all 6 courses in the French department, were taught by Baguette. He was the only teacher the department had. My stomach dropped as I realized I had locked myself into yet another class taught by the worst professor I've ever had to this day. This class is where the revenge begins. And I'm sorry if that preamble was too long, but I had to give context as to how horrible Baguette was. Even still, I'm frankly not doing him justice. His class was an artful train wreck of incompetence. In the slowest slow motion available over nearly 60 class periods, and I had to do it again, only this time was harder material. I had been keeping up with R and S over the winter break, and S was going back to Spain, so she wouldn't be back in the next class with me. But I got R to enroll in the same section of beginning French 2 as me. Baguette passed out the syllabus to beginning French 2, and it was the exact same as French 1, down to us using the website again, just in the higher chapters instead of the basic chapters. Now here is the thing about learning a foreign language. You have to build from the basics, or else none of the other stuff makes sense. None of us in that class, not one person, knew any of the material past maybe chapter 3. Most of us didn't even know how to ask questions. I did. So I asked questions for people who didn't. Since S wasn't there, well, if you thought we bumbled through the basic material, no harder bumbling took place then when we started on things that have no direct English translation like in on. When he asked students questions in this class, they just kind of looked at him dumbfounded and shrug. We got a study guide for our first exam and I was going to study hard so that I could get a better grade than a C. Besides a brief stint with depression my first semester that made me not be able to go to classes and fail one of my courses, a C was the lowest grade I had gotten at university. I must have studied for 20 hours over the course of a week before the exam. I hadn't even put that much effort into classes for my major. I got into class on a day of the exam and nothing that I had spent all that time studying was on it. I bombed that test spectacularly, getting a 30%. At this point, I was pretty much done. I was willing to go to my professor's office hours and ask him how I was supposed to study for his exams effectively, and his response is what began my quest to get revenge on him. He told me to watch YouTube videos. I don't know what it was about this that got me so pissed, but I was just fired up. But that wasn't all that drove me to take the revenge I took on this jerk. Now, what drove me to go after this guy was R calling me up crying after getting his exam back. He did worse than I did. He got 15%. He kept repeating through sobs that he just wanted to be a good student and that he didn't want to disappoint his mom again. I am not ashamed to admit that I cried at this. I thought back to that kid in Finch 1 after the final, about my peers, and about R, and something inside me just snapped. I was going to get this guy fired and peacefully do anything else I could to ruin this guy's life one way or another. And R was going to be my right-hand man. We met at his dorm and started brainstorming. It was about halfway through the semester, after our midterms. We both had a job, a significant other, extracurricular activities, and I was taking 19 hours again this semester. We were going to need time on our side, a commodity that neither of us had, and we were going to need it quickly. We knew that the professor was going to be gone for a week at a conference right after spring break, so there was a 2-week window there. But even still, we needed more time for what we started planning to do. I picked a doctor's note for 2 weeks absence, and R agreed to use all 4 of his absences to meet at the same time. French was supposed to occur and plan our peaceful academic cope. Now, I knew I was eventually going to get caught from word go, but I was so confident that I could get this guy fired before I would have a disciplinary hearing that I took the gamble, and Baguette took the bait. He excused me for 2 whole weeks. So you're probably wondering what we actually did. Well, the reason we needed so much time is that we needed time to both conduct interviews from the class as well as collect data on scores. We got a total of 13 out of the 17 students to make a statement about Baguette's performance in his beginning French 2 class, and all of them were negative. This was just in one section of the course. Then we asked if we could have their exam scores so that we could have some hard data to nail this guy with. All but 2 compiled. We did some quick math and determined that more than half the class failed the exams, with most scoring between 30 and 50. But as it turns out, we didn't even need the exam scores given to us. We figured out that the online grade database site that our school uses so students can monitor their grades without asking their professors has a built-in feature that shows the class average of every assignment that is put into the gradebook. Not a single assignment had a class average above a 50 except for the homework, which had a class average of around 80. No doubt thanks to the stupid exploit in the website. Sure enough, I got tagged with a notice that I broke the discipline code of the university because obvious shop is obvious. But it didn't matter. I had everything I needed to go to the foreign language department chair and sort this crap out. And so, I did. I showed the department chair all the data, let him listen to the audio from the student testimonies, as well as gave my own testimony on a course. After showing him all this, he was dumbfounded. Not only did the chair not know that Baguette was a crappy teacher, almost nobody did course evaluations for French 1. so he thought that Baguette was doing a decent job. He took all my evidence and gave it to the Dean of Arts and Sciences, and a couple weeks later, I get an email saying that Baguette was back gone and that I was going to be withdrawn from the course along with everyone else who would have likely failed. Those who would have passed got to get a credit received grade without having to take the final. He got fired one semester before he qualified for his tenure. But that's not the juiciest morsel of this tale. You're probably wondering how he got deported and how I found out that he got deported because of his firing. Well, after my disciplinary hearing got thrown out because the complainant was no longer affiliated with the university, I got more than I bargained for. During his lectures, one of the few times he spoke English was after he introduced the syllabus on the first day. He had everyone introduce themselves and he started the exercise by introducing himself. Well, in his introduction, I remember him saying something about him being an immigrant from Venezuela. I live in the States, and some of you might know that we have pretty strict visa policies. Well, ours is pretty conservative. After our work got Baguette fired, we celebrated by getting some beer and shooting the crap. We talked about random aspects of the course and the fact that he was an immigrant was brought up. Apparently R didn't know this and he was pretty upset about it. I tried to calm him down but he went on a rant that I tried to politely nod along to while tuning out since I'm not really about that. I didn't think anything of it until a couple of days later. He called me up and told me that he tipped Baguette off to a certain immigration agency for a visa check. His words, not mine. And that now all we had to do was wait. I was shocked. I didn't think this would go this far. I think that I was pleased with this, but in reality, I was kinda bummed. Since he was probably here on an academic visa, since he was a professor, he probably is going back home to Venezuela. I'm glad though that he won't be teaching any more of my fellow students at my university because I wouldn't wish his classes on anyone.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.